Canberra Metalheads.
The Archives.
Me and You is Season 2. Alright, let's kick it.
Hello and welcome to Canberra Metalheads. You got Marky Malphas
and JDecay.
Today we'll be running through some vintage edition of the show with some vinyls, CDs and old school stuff from Australia and around the world. I'm joined in the studio with Joel from Witchskull.
Hey, how's it going?
And Reggae from Reign of Terror.
Hey, how's things?
Awesome, man. Yeah, going well. Glad to have you boys both in the show, and you've brought quite a collection of music from over the years. We'll be kicking off this part of the show with everything from late 80s right back to when we the metal scene really started, really. And this is the first part of a 3-part series, and we'll be running through some stuff later on. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this section of the show, and enjoy some early metal stuff. And, you know, who better than to take us through it than you boys?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man.
Yep, thanks, man. Glad when you think of vintage, you think of us.
Yeah, well, there is that element of it. I'm not here to you know, make you feel old, but at the same time, you've got all the info, so that's where it
we
comes
already
at.
do, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here I am, you know, just getting into metal from the 2000s onwards. So I like to, you know, backdate and see where it all came from, especially in the Canberra scene as well. Like, it's a fairly unique scene, and, you know, it's produced some solid bands that have later on gone to play on the world stage. So, I mean, it's a good spot to start. And you guys have seen all that over the years, especially, you know, I wasn't here as part of the Metal for the Brain stuff as well, and that comes up all the time. And I like to explore every avenue, you know, and show everybody where it all came from.
Yeah, cool. I suppose some of this is just like the stuff that maybe Reggae and I from our era sort of grew up on during that sort of era. Mm-hmm. So that's what we try to do, just sort of bring a selection of stuff that kind of, you know, had an impact on us when we were younger.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we just listened to Venom Rip Ride. I mean, obviously they're playing on that's some of the world stuff that we've got. We've got a few Australian bands as well, but it's a good one to kick it off with there.
Yeah, it's my favourite Venom song of all time. It's just a classic on every level, I reckon.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like we're saying while we're playing the track, you know, very extreme band, and everything they did seemed to just be that next level, you know, to really get the name out there and, you know, get a reputation.
Yeah, I just think they were the forerunners of everything that I sort of liked that came after them.
Yep.
So, yeah, for me, they're just the most important sort of, you know, metal band of that sort of newer sort of era.
Yep.
You know, and still sort of all their songs really hold up for me.
Yeah. Yeah, as well as compared to the newer stuff as well. Like, you can see sort of where people get influence, especially in more extreme metal scene. You know, they sort of pave the way for all that stuff.
Yeah, well, not just, I don't just think that. It's obviously just, that's how it was, you know what I mean? Like, if you know, listen to really early sort of interviews with Slayer and Metallica and all of those bands, mm-hmm. everything, all the heavy stuff that sort of came, you know, a lot of that influence came from what Venom were doing. Obviously, you know, they were sort of influenced by, you know, the gruffness and the chaos of Motorhead and whatever. So Venom definitely have a lot of elements of that. Mm-hmm. But just their lyrical content and just the way they kind of, their stage show and everything was, you know, just how everything was just a lot more rough and ready. Mm-hmm. I just think that part, you know, paved the way for all the sort of really good stuff that came after it. But I still reckon nothing was as good as them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess they sort of wrote the rules, so it's kind of like everyone has to stick to it. You know what I mean? Like, if you create a style of music, then you're the forerunner of that. People can only ever sort of be equal to that. They'll never be. If you create something, you're the engineer of it. It's for people to compete with that. They'd be creating something else that isn't.
Yeah, and look, for me, it's like it comes down to songwriting as well. Like, I think a lot of people, if you don't like Venom, it's easy to just, you know, discard them because of the chaos of it all. But if you just strip it back to what they actually do with songwriting, man, they just, you know, I don't think anyone in the metal scene's ever sort of, well, not with the stuff that came after that. I'm not talking about Sabbath, Motorhead, Priest, all the stuff before it. Mm-hmm. But from once Venom started that whole new kind of era of extreme stuff, they wrote the best songs.
Yep.
You know, all of their songs just still stand up today. So whether you like them or you don't, if you just take it straight on a songwriting, you know, from that point of view, it's just hard to argue. They're just on top of the pile.
Yeah, exactly. And still what they're doing today, like the guys from Venom Inc., which we've even had here in Canberra. Reggae knows more about that tour as well.
Yeah. Oh, you got to support them. How awesome was that?
That was a defining moment in my life. So I could die happy now. So.
I was there, mate. I got to watch it all.
No, Venom, to me, obviously they're a very special band. It's the reason why I got into metal. I'd heard a little bit of like Alice Cooper and Bon Jovi and stuff that was going on at the time, like talking about later mid-80s, and then accidentally picked up the Venom record and put it on, and it just slapped me in the head. Like, it was just like, man, what is this? Like, you know, it was so much more extreme than anything that was going on. And I wasn't into the full-on stuff at the time, like Motorhead or Saxon or Judas Priest. I was more into the glam 80s rock. But going from that and hearing Venom for the first time, it's just like a punch straight in the face. You can't ignore the band, no matter whether you like them or you don't. You can't ignore them, and you can't forget them.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to see that they're still kicking it out, man. Like with the Venom Inc. stuff, it's one of those things where you can tell it withstands the test of time because they're still able to smash out shows.
Well, I think there's 3 versions now, isn't there? Because Venom Inc. has only got Mantis now.
Abaddon's gone. Yeah,
so Abaddon's got his own one, and then Cronus says, so he's got one. So there's all 3 members are doing the same stuff. But look, good luck to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The songs are there. People still want to hear them. So
that's
good
right.
luck to 'em.
It's like they've they were so much of a power together. They've each created their own thing separately. It's like the
franchise. Like,
it's just like so many different. Like, it's nearly like they were too much. They needed to be split up. You know what I mean?
I think the first show they did in Britain was at Hammersmith. So it was just like that whole mentality of going, we're not going to play gigs until we can go to London and put on a stage show like Kiss. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was just that mentality that they had. That to me had a lot to do with all of the DIY stuff that came with the extreme metal from after that.
Yep.
It just showed you that you don't have to be, to me a lot of the current stuff, it's all based on being precise and being perfect. And that's, I know I'm older, but I think that's the thing that I miss the most is that lack of sort of chaos and energy that came with the older stuff through just not being the greatest musicians or not having unlimited amounts of studio time. So you ended up with something that they probably wanted it to be better than what it was at the time, but it just, heaps of stuff we'll play later will have that same kind of energy to it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what we're looking forward to, and what a good way to kick it off with some Venom, just to, set the precedent of the rest of the show. And we'll move it up, like I said before. We're going to have some vinyl editions as well as some of the CDs. So now we've got a Manowar track. You bought this one on vinyl. We'll be able to hear that. That'll have that vinyl feel to it, I guess, which a lot of this music was recorded with the idea of being played on that medium. Yeah. So it's good to have that in the show and be able to present it how it was meant to be played, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. I grew up on this record. I bought it when it came out. So for me, it's always going to be, I think it came out when I was 14. So I just never tire of hearing this record. It's
rad.
I know they a band that kind of...
they're very divisive.
They polarise people.
It's cod pieces.
But I rate them highly. Again, just
excellent.
Killer songs.
Yep, and you've selected this track. It's the first track on the vinyl. It's called All Men Play on 10.
That's the one.
And
we'll never turn it down again.
And we'll listen to that one on vinyl. That lo-fi sound, as much as we enjoyed it.
How it was supposed to be, mate.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, like I said before, we got a massive selection of stuff to play through here on the show with the anything predating the late 80s. So we're moving into some Exodus now. You've brought in that to show a few tracks that not maybe everybody's heard before, and I know a lot of listeners to the show have been listening to some like more recent sort of stuff, so it's good to call it back. What do you have to say about this Exodus track, which is A Lesson in Violence?
Oh, just this album in general. I just think it's one of the best metal albums ever made.
Yep.
I think it was recorded in '84, but didn't come out till '85.
Yep.
And I think it was just, they were doing things as good. Anything Metallica and Slayer were doing at the time, they were kind of matching. But unfortunately, things didn't really work out for them. The second album wasn't so great. But if you get a chance, if you don't know this first album, Bonded by Blood, I highly recommend it. I think it's one of the best metal records ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So A Lesson in Violence, just one of the many great tracks on it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and the consensus around the room, everybody, anyone else, get into some Exodus or?
I got to admit, I missed them the first time round.
Yep.
I didn't get. I was sort of more obsessed by Slayer and Metallica at the time,
Yep.
and just doing that. Megadeth had come out, but look, these guys are good. Just didn't get into them the first time round. Just
Yep.
had other stuff going on, but I can look back on this and go, yeah, that's really good stuff.
Yeah, cool. That's good to hear, man. It's like I said, everything that I'm listening to now is in hindsight because obviously I started later on, and I'm sort of trying to pave that way of getting into the newer stuff, and then still paying homage to what everybody was into at the time.
Yeah. Look, I think '84 was one of probably the best year in metal ever.
Yep.
If you look at all the albums that sort of came out,
Yep.
and although this one came out in '85, it was only because of some drama with the record company. This album should have been out in '84.
Yeah.
And if you look at everything that came out in that year, it was a pivotal moment, full stop, in everything that was happening with heavy music.
Mm-hmm.
Just a great year, and this is definitely one of the gems among all of it.
Yep, awesome, man.
Fine.
All right, we'll listen to this track now and stick around for some more hits from the same time. Exodus, A Lesson in Violence, album that came out in '85. Still had that brutal feel to it as well. We were talking in the break about the different timing and stuff like that. It's interesting to have musicians in the studio talking about the music because you understand different levels of where it's at. Me, myself, not being in a band, I listen to an album differently, but obviously yourself, Joel, being a drummer, you can sort of pick up on different timings and things like that. It changes the dynamic of how you listen to an album, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose we all listen to things differently. I think with albums like that, I was saying in the break, I think it was a really pivotal record at its time because the lyrical content and just the aggression of the music, it had a lot to do with how sort of heavy music, extreme music sort of progressed and went forward.
Yep.
So there's certain things that, I only know that because, Marcus, who I'm in Witchskull with, he bought the album on mail order. So I think he was possibly the first person in Australia to have it. So we were listening to that album intently from the age of 15. And when we heard things like that, there just wasn't, it was very new and cutting edge. So when you're from that era, you can kind of see how things kind of progressed the way they have. And sometimes albums sort of get a little bit forgotten. And I think because that sort of, the next album they did was pretty poor, I reckon. So they never really got their
wings, yeah.
In my opinion,
Yeah.
I think they're a far more important band than bands like Megadeth or Anthrax, you know what I mean? So I think that the quality of this album is on par with what Slayer and Metallica were doing at the same time.
Yep.
But they just never, unfortunately, got sort of the level of respect they deserved for it, for whatever reason.
Well, look, yeah, some of it, like we've heard in the past, it's just right place, right time. Like, everybody's seen the documentary of the Anvil documentary that came out a few years ago, and it's given them a second wind, I guess, with the recognition of that documentary. And it's just like, it's not just the time, it's also the place as well. Like, a lot of these bands came out at the same time, but they just weren't in the right area to sort of become as big as the others.
Well, I think what affected them is the album should have come out in '84. And for what I can't remember what it was. I think they had dramas with the label or when
one of those things.
So it was released a year late, which doesn't sound like much in this day and age. But back then, there's a hell of a lot of stuff going on. If you look at any of the records that were kind of come out in '84, you know what I mean, it would have been way more beneficial for them because 84 was the same year as Ride the Lightning, you know what I mean? So
Yep.
it would have been better for them had it come out a year earlier.
Yeah.
So I suppose, right time, right place, and for whatever reason, some things kick off and others don't. I think it had a bit to do with the lyrical content on this record's pretty full on, and I think that that may have worked against them. But
Yeah. Who knows?
I'm glad.
Yeah, dude.
It's made it a better record because of it.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's just about some people like hinge their bets. They might pull a song if they're not sure about it, especially in live shows, depending on the venue, the place, whatever. It's good to see bands that just stick to their their idea of just doing what they wanted to do, whether or not people agree with it or not.
Yeah.
It's part of what made the scene what it is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So that's rad, man. We've on the same vein of Extreme, we've got a Mortal Sin track now coming up.
Yeah, look, this band started, the album came out in 87. I was lucky enough to go see them a couple of times real early on with this original lineup on this record, and they were great, they signed off the strength of this album, they signed the same label, the same international label as Metallica, I think, at the time, but a bigger deal than Metallica, so it was a really big thing when they got picked up. And I used to go see them, and this album is an absolute beauty.
Cool. All right, so this is Mortal Sin with Mayhemic Destruction off the album of the same name.
Yeah, Reggae picked that track.
Yep, that's one of my favourites. My first encounter with Mortal Sin was buying Hot Metal magazine. I don't know if any of you guys remember that, but it kicked off in about 88. Mortal Sin it was like one of the first 4 issues of the magazine. You bought it and you got a free Mortal Sin record with it. And I'd not really heard of anything coming out of Australia up until that point. And then suddenly these guys are there with a free record on every copy of the magazine. And for a kid that wasn't old enough to go to gigs but was still buying the magazines and that sort of thing, it really pushed these guys to sort of a national hero level status for us 12, 13-year-olds that were just getting into metal at the time.
Yep. That sounds rad, man. It's I'm glad that edition came out, because we may not have Reign of Terror as they are today if that magazine hadn't been available.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it wasn't for Mortal Sin and that magazine and that news agency or whatever having it at the same time, I may not have Reggae on the show right now. So all the planets have aligned.
That's it.
Awesome. All right, we'll listen to that track, Mortal Sin with Mayhemic Destruction. That one there was a track that Joel brought in from the album of the same name. We introduced that one, and Reggae chose the song. So that one there rounds off the first major part of the bracket, where we were just talking about individual songs and also playing the tracks as well. But now we'll be moving into a 3-part bracket just to round off the decade of the late 80s right back. We'll be kicking it off with some Slayer. Slayer's a really good representation of that time. I mean, we wouldn't be able to have an 80s bracket without a Slayer track. Joel, you brought that one in with the Slayer track. Hell Awaits. Do you remember what time that album came out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 85. So, this is my favourite era of Slayer. The first 3, I reckon, are all awesome, obviously.
Yep.
But yeah, this one for me just sort of stands out. I think at the time, I didn't get into it at first. I was only 15, and it kind of was a bit full on for me. I couldn't grasp it, but it didn't take long. A few more lessons, I kind of latched on.
Yep.
A mate came some bloke came to our school from America, and he introduced it to us all. So when we were sort of 15, he brought all this stuff with him that we'd never heard of, and Hell Awaits was one of them. And initially I couldn't sort of wrap my head around it, but once a few more listens, I kind of realised, there's something here.
Yeah.
And it's just stuck with me. I just think this is one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, Slayer's. I remember Reggae introduced me to some more Slayer and more of the the earlier tracks. When I was starting to get into the metal scene, I've known Reggae for several years prior to this. Reggae, how do you find the Hell Awaits album?
Oh, look, I'm not going to say it's my favourite record of theirs, but you're talking about the difference between brilliance and awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm going to say Hell Awaits could be the first death metal album. It's got that sort of Florida death metal feel that I think that Death took to town with a couple of years later. Like if you look at Hell Awaits and then you look at Leprosy and Scream Bloody Gore, I reckon there's a direct progression from those records.
Yep.
And straight into the Florida scene after that.
Yeah, cool. So, you know, this album potentially influenced the entire scene through other bands as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, definitely even locally influenced bands, I'd say, as well. Slayer in general, not just this album. So, yeah, that's cool. We'll give everybody a taste out there. I'm assuming most fans of the show have listened to a fair bit of Slayer already, but it's cool to be able to play it on the show in this, you know, in the closing editions of the 2018 shows. So closing up now with a 3-part bracket from the 80s, and that'll be closing out the decade for this edition of the show. So kicking it off now with Slayer, Necrophiliac. That was the closing of the 80s bracket. That one there had the last track there. That album came out in 89, so it was a perfect time to close it all off. That one there was a Morbid Angel track. Do you guys enjoy listening to some of that, you know, raw Morbid Angel stuff?
Oh, we'd love it. Personally, it's a huge influence on me. The music was light years ahead of anything else that was going on at the time in death metal or thrash metal, but for me, being a lyricist in the band as well, I found David Vincent's lyrics very obscure but intriguing.
Yep.
And it influenced me a lot and got me into a lot of occult stuff and H.P. Lovecraft, things like that, where they weren't just talking about serial killers or zombies or straight ahead horror stuff, which I love that stuff too, but this stuff had a more occult vibe to it, something a lot deeper and something that you could study the lyrics and get into it and then follow it through with reading stuff like Lovecraft, the Necronomicon, things like that, Aleister Crowley.
Excellent.
So it had a much deeper breadth to it.
Yep.
If you get my drift.
Yeah, like it inspired you to research further into the themes, which, you know, a lot of it is that. It's finding something you like and then continuing down that path. So, you know, if it's not just music, it's also the themes as well. The amount of, like, horror movies I've watched from listening to metal, you know, you go and find a sample that they might use in a track or a song they wrote about, you know. I mean, I've watched Human Centipede more since I've started listening to Reign of Terror, so...
Yeah, what was our kickback for that?
Yeah.
It was definitely a pivotal album, like, you know, from... Reggae's in my era, you know, when that came out, there was just nothing like it at the time. Really heavily influenced when I was still an Armored Angel. We were really heavily, our songwriting became heavily influenced by what was going on that album.
Yep.
So I just think it was one of those sort of things that was just a real game changer. When it sort of hit, everyone's just kind of, you know, it was just like, okay, and then that sort of set the tone for the next decade, really. Mm-hmm. It was really influential on what happened for the whole of the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd say that also, you know, having mentioned Armored Angel and influencing the band, Armored Angel would have then went on to influence more bands in the scene because they were right at that pinnacle of the next wave of 90s music came through as well.
Yeah, maybe. I suppose I don't know because I was in the band, so I don't really know what kind of effect, if any, we had. But I suppose what was interesting for us is, you know, back when that album came out, I remember we used to cover the song Maze of Torment, you know, a year after it came out. So for people that were into that sort of stuff, it was very unlikely you were going to see Morbid Angel in Australia at that time. You know what I mean? So if you wanted to hear that sort of stuff, you know, I think that's why the Australian sort of local scene was pretty strong. People would come along, and for us, we used to play sort of, you know, 3 or 4 covers every sort of gig we played because that's just the way the scene was. It was stuff that we liked and we related to.
Yep.
And the people that came to see us used to get into that as well.
Yeah, they used to enjoy watching you play, and you guys enjoyed playing it as well.
Well, for us, it was kind of like, it was a really important thing for us. Mm-hmm. It's kind of unusual when you think about it because you wouldn't get too many bands. Like, we were quite established, I suppose, in the local scene at that stage, but we still always played covers. Yep. Whereas most bands now might do one, but you know, we the whole time we were going, we always had sort of covers of the bands, only of bands that we liked. But I suppose when you're playing those sorts of songs, it helps influence how you write as well. So yeah, it was definitely a big influence, a real sort of pivotal record, I suppose.
Yeah, cool. No, that's exactly right. And we had Accept before that. That was a vinyl that we played. that you brought in. Now you mentioned where are those guys from?
They're the best band that's ever come out of Germany for me. You know, I love them. They were really important for me growing up as a kid. And that song's probably like one of the first kind of thrash speed metal songs ever to come out. You know, it was 82.
Yep.
So I remember when we first heard that, it was kind of, you know, we were pretty sort of blown away by that. That and sort of, you know, Witching Hour by Venom, to me, there's probably others I can't recall or don't know about, but to me they seem to be the first two that really sort of sent everything down that path of the speed and thrash stuff that came.
Excellent. Yeah, I think, like you mentioned before, that early 80s era sort of paved the way for a whole bunch of more styles to come through. And from every country too. Like most countries had like an album come out of them. Like you mentioned, you know, we had anything for Europe and anything like that. And then also the States and finally Australia eventually had that scene as well.
Yeah, well, the 80s is full on, man. Like we were saying before, like Venom put Welcome to Hell out in 81, and then Morbid Angel put out Altars of Madness in 89. It's not, you know, it felt like a long time at the time, but you realise how quick that period is and how much, you know, extreme music changed in that short space of time. And that's why, those two records are so sort of, you know, influential, I suppose.
Yeah.
Cool.
That birth of that Florida death metal scene and the you know, the kick tone and the guitar tone just edging it out.
Yeah, well, that's right.
80s,
and even when you hear Morbid Angel, you can kind of hear that that's still got a bit of an 80s sound to it, that one. But by the next one, you know, it was Blessed of the Sick was the second one, wasn't it?
Second one,
Yeah, so that you can tell has got much more of that sort of template for the death metal sort of stuff that sort of came. So, yeah, it's kind of, that's why I sort of find it fascinating. There was a lot more change that went on in that decade of the 80s than what you found any decade since, and probably what there ever will be, I reckon.
Cool, and that's why we kicked off the three-part edition with the 80s and prior to the 80s. It's the underground metal scene edition of the hits from the 80s. So
That's it.
That closed off that bracket. And thank you everybody for listening through that show and cranking out some of the tunes from there. It's been a pleasure having Joel and Reggae in, and stay tuned for next week's show where we'll be going through further on of this interview where we'll be going through the 90s. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for listening to Canberra Metalheads.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, Mark, how you going, man?
Good, man. How you doing, Jake? We've got Alex and Jake, and what roles are you in? What roles do you perform in the band?
I'm the lead guitar.
Okay. That's Alex, yeah?
Yep. And Jake is I'm the lead singer and rhythm guitarist.
So this is the interview section of the Canberra Metalheads show. We've got Marky Malphas and
JDecay.
We're joined here on the phone interview with the guys from Audio Rain. We got Jake and Alex. How you doing, boys?
How's it going? Not bad, good. How are you?
Good to have you call into the show. You guys are all the way from Adelaide. So that's good to hear some voices from over the border.
Other side of the world.
Yeah, that's right. Well, as far as the Australian scene, that's pretty far away. But you know, a lot of venues and gigs and stuff are usually fairly. There's a fair bit of distance between towns.
Yeah, we're not in Europe. Yeah, Germany. That's for sure.
Yep, exactly. But anyway, we heard from you guys for your new single that came out. So we've had a sample sent to us and things like that with the Census single.
Yep. Yep.
And you guys, just a quick breakdown of the roles. So Alex, you're the lead guitarist, and Jake, you do rhythm as well.
Yep.
And coming together on the new single, how's it been recording that and putting that one out?
Well, a bit of a process.
Yeah.
Feels like it's been a year or so. I feel it's been.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we had a few things going on. Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey getting here, but after all the work, it's come out, and we're pretty happy with it. Excellent. So yeah, 12 months is a good amount of recording time. I'm assuming that you guys would have, you definitely know the song inside and out by this point. I would like to think so.
Yeah. All the takes and double takes, I guess you had. Whereabouts did you record that one, in Adelaide as well?
Yep. We recorded at House of Sap with our engineer Jared Nettle. And funny enough, he actually is partially responsible for the way the arrangement of the song has ended up on the final recording as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've seen his, yeah. I mean, Jared, we work with Jared, and he's a young guy, he's a bit of a gun, though. He's got a good ear and a good sound that he comes up with when you work with him. And the album, I suppose, as I said, it was a journey because there were things going on, and a little break in between sort of doing the album. And when we came back, we kept it continued on. Jerry had his own little idea and he had senses and likes, so it sort of changed up a bit, because obviously the first single that came out a couple months ago was Betrayal, which you would have heard that on Ashoon, and Senses is now sort of very different to Betrayal. Betrayal was very gutsy and heavy and edgy, and Senses is more of an emotion-packed burner, so yeah. Different style. We got the album's got a lot of different dynamics and different sounds in it.
Yeah, cool. No, that's good. Actually, it's good that you mentioned the song Betrayal. So that's the intro to the interview. So you could probably speak a little bit more about that one as well as Census. You mentioned that it was slightly more heavy as well. So you're sort of covering both grounds of your style with Betrayal and Census.
Yeah, having them as the two singles is sort of showing both ends of the spectrum of what we can do. It's not all just heavy. We've got to show that we've got a bit of a soft side as well. So
excellent. Well, that's what I'd like to hear. I mean, it comes out more and more bands that have multiple different sounds. So it's good to be able to show that to everybody as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do as well.
Yeah, that's right. So you guys, obviously you got the new single out. Is there you got like a surrounding tour or gig that you be running through with that one as well?
Well, that's still in the organisation process. I must admit, we've been super flat out, and there's been some going with other stuff, or with organising the band, and we had our live launch for the album actually here in Adelaide, HQ, because we just were flat out too, because we supported US rockers Skillet. Okay. And then we had our album launch straight after, and then we're still sort of laying down plans to get away and take it from the road and get some shows. So it will happen.
Cool.
But I just can't give you some hard details yet.
Oh, that's all good, man. I know you're busy. We were talking off mic before about you work with the fire department as well. So that's good to hear that you're doing good things as well as good music.
That's just, burning off some energy. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Well, yeah, everybody that I speak to about live shows says that, yep, you're definitely burning some energy on the stage. So it's good to be able to do that and get paid as well off the stage.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, we definitely will get around, and just got to keep your eyes and ears open. If you get on the Audio Rain Facebook page, I suppose Facebook is the most common. Get on there and you'll be able to follow and see what's happening. But we have got a show coming up. We're on a Metal Fest coming up in Adelaide, which is not necessarily our next show, but it's the next sort of festival we're on, which is Churches of Steel in Adelaide.
Okay, cool.
Which is about 17 bands, I think. It's a sort of all-day, 12 till midnight event, and we're playing on that. So
excellent.
I'm sure that'll be full on.
Yeah, so... Yeah, that's
bands than us there too.
That's right. Well, that's a good spruik there for the festival as well. I hear that the Adelaide scene's has a really good metal following. We get actually a lot of fans from Adelaide from that reach out to the show, asking if we've played certain bands or heard of certain bands. So it's good to hear that we've got that reach as well. I think it all came about because we had a Adelaide band called As I Destruct came through Canberra. And just from speaking to those guys and kind of hanging out with those dudes sort of got us amongst the Adelaide and South Australian scene, which is really cool. I'm glad that we've managed to make that connection.
Yeah, there's a lot of heavy fans here, man. So.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you've got you've got the Slayer show coming up in March as well in Adelaide. The Slayer and Behemoth.
Side show, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I think Anthrax is playing about
and
as well.
Anthrax as well.
Yeah. In fact, I think Adelaide's the only one getting side shows now, Alex. I reckon.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think that the general metal scene seems to be growing more and more just in the past 12 months. We've noticed it here in Canberra, and it's good to hear that it's also nationwide.
Yeah, absolutely, man. They will, and such with download, and then they're reissuing of the actually hard copy of, well, not hard copy, the physical copy of the Heavy Mag has come back now, you know, which was also those magazines were lost, so Heavy Mag's back in distribution. So yeah, hopefully, hard rock, heavy metal is all thriving again.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's good to hear that you guys are at the all part of the scene and helping build that following as well, as much as we're trying to help it as well with what we do.
Absolutely, man.
And it's a good time to have a new single out. So it's as well as the previous single, Betrayal. Now we've got Census come out as well from you guys, which is Audio Rain. So for anybody out there that hasn't heard them before, if you enjoyed the initial song Betrayal, stick around to listen to their new single from Audio Rain, which is Census, which we'll be playing just after this, and here on Canberra Metalheads 2XX FM, and check them out on their social media pages as well. Audio Rain on Facebook, and do you have any other? You guys are on Spotify as well, I noticed, and SoundCloud.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Apple Music as well.
Excellent. Yeah.
It'll be on most of the major digital platforms. But if you want hard physical copies, just get in contact with us through the band page.
Excellent. All right. Well, that's where you can get your hands on that one.
Good on you, fellas.
All right. Thanks Alex and Jake. All right. See you, boys.
All right, mate. Cheers.
Bianca, bam!